Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Benjamin Harper was the kind of lawyer who could charm his way through any jury, a master of persuasion with a relentless hunger for success. Emily, his devoted wife, had stood by his side through countless late nights and high-stakes cases. She believed in him, even when their marriage felt like an afterthought to his career. When Emily discovered she was pregnant, she thought it would finally bring them closer together. Instead, it shattered her world. The affair wasn't just a betrayal, it was a mockery. Claire, Emily's closest friend, had been a fixture in their lives, a confidant who knew their secrets. Emily never saw it coming when Benjamin announced he was leaving her for Claire. His words were as cold as they were final. "I need someone who matches my ambition. Someone who can elevate me, not hold me back." Emily's protests fell on deaf ears. Benjamin walked out of their modest apartment with nothing but a suitcase and a smug smile, leaving her to grapple with the reality of raising a child alone. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was public. Friends and colleagues whispered about how Emily had been traded up for someone more glamorous. Devastated but determined, Emily made a choice. She would not let Benjamin define her story. The first few months were grueling. Emily, heavily pregnant and emotionally wrecked, juggled temp jobs to make ends meet. Nights were spent in tears, but her son Max, growing inside her, gave her strength. With every kick and flutter, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew she had to rebuild her life, not just for herself but for him. Emily's path to becoming a judge started with a simple but audacious decision. She enrolled in law school. The tuition was daunting, but she found ways to make it work. Scholarships, part-time work, and an ironclad will to succeed. Her professors quickly recognized her brilliance. She didn't just study the law. She lived it, pouring every ounce of her pain into understanding justice. Meanwhile, Benjamin thrived in his new life with Claire. His career skyrocketed, bolstered by Claire's family connections. Photos of the couple at charity galas and exclusive vacations filled social media, a stark contrast to Emily's quiet, grinding existence. But beneath Benjamin's polished veneer, cracks were forming. His ambition was consuming him, and Claire's wealth came with strings attached. Emily's journey wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. She graduated at the top of her class, her valedictory speech a testament to resilience and grit. The crowd applauded, unaware of the silent promise she made to herself. She would wield the law to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Her career began in a small legal aid office, representing clients who couldn't afford flashy attorneys like Benjamin. She quickly earned a reputation for being fiercely compassionate yet unyielding in the face of injustice. Judges admired her, opposing counsel respected her, and clients adored her. Max grew up watching his mother's determination. By the time Emily was appointed to the bench, he was a bright and curious boy who often asked her about the cases she presided over. To him, she was a superhero, a beacon of hope. Years passed. Benjamin's career took a darker turn. His name, once associated with brilliance, now appeared in whispers of corruption. Clients accused him of mismanagement, and his personal life began to unravel. Claire, tired of his excuses and erratic behavior, left him, taking her wealth with her. Benjamin was now a shadow of the man he had been, a desperate, disheveled figure fighting to stay afloat. Emily, meanwhile, had ascended to the role of judge in one of the most prestigious circuits in the state. Her courtroom was known for its fairness, her rulings meticulous and impartial. She thought she had left Benjamin and his betrayal in the past, but fate had other plans. One day, as Emily reviewed the docket for an upcoming trial, her heart stopped. The name on the defendant's list was one she knew all too well: Benjamin Harper. The case was a financial scandal that had made headlines: embezzlement, fraud, and ethical violations. Benjamin, once a legal titan, now stood accused of betraying his clients. The irony was almost poetic. As Emily prepared for the trial, memories flooded back. The pain, the humiliation, the sleepless nights. But she knew she couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about doing what was right, no matter how personal the stakes. The morning of the trial, Benjamin entered the courtroom with his usual swagger, but it quickly dissolved when he saw her. His face turned pale, his confident stride faltered. He hadn't seen Emily in years, and now she was the one holding the gavel over his fate. "Good morning, counsel," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's proceed." Benjamin's life was about to be unraveled in the very courtroom where he once held sway. And Emily was ready to ensure that justice would be served, not just for his clients, but for herself and the life he abandoned. The courtroom was unusually quiet, the air thick with tension as Benjamin Harper sat at the defendant's table. He looked smaller than Emily remembered, his once polished exterior dulled by years of desperation. Gone was the man who had walked out of their home with a smug grin. In his place was someone hunched over, weighed down by scandal and disgrace. Emily's gaze remained steady as she called the session to order. The spectators filled the benches, eager to witness the downfall of a man whose name once commanded respect in legal circles. Reporters scribbled furiously, their cameras discreetly flashing as Benjamin avoided their stares. "Mr. Harper," Emily began, her voice measured. "You are charged with embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. How do you plead?" Benjamin's lawyer rose, a young but nervous man who seemed out of his depth. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Emily nodded, her expression unreadable. "Very well. Let's proceed with opening arguments." As the trial unfolded, the evidence against Benjamin mounted. Witness after witness testified about his deceit, how he had diverted client funds into shell accounts, promised settlements that never materialized, and left families devastated. Emily remained impartial, her face a mask of professionalism. Inside, however, she wrestled with a storm of emotions. One witness, an elderly widow named Mrs. Grant, described how she had trusted Benjamin with her late husband's pension. "He said I wouldn't have to worry about anything," she said, her voice trembling. "But when I tried to withdraw money for my medical bills, it was gone." Benjamin's defense attorney tried to discredit her, suggesting she hadn't understood the financial documents she signed. But the jury saw through the tactic, their expressions hardening as Mrs. Grant broke into tears. Emily's heart ached for the victims, but she never let it show. Her role wasn't to punish Benjamin for their shared past. It was to ensure justice for those he had wronged. During a recess, Benjamin finally mustered the courage to approach Emily in her chambers. He hesitated at the threshold, his face a mixture of regret and desperation. "Your Honor," he began awkwardly, "may I have a word?" Emily didn't look up from her papers. "This is highly inappropriate, Mr. Harper. If you have concerns, direct them to your attorney." "Emily," he pleaded, dropping the formalities. "I know you hate me. I know I've done terrible things. But I'm asking no begging for your understanding. I'm not that man anymore." She finally met his gaze, her eyes cold. "You're right. You're not the same man. The Benjamin Harper I knew was arrogant, but at least he was competent. Now you're just desperate." His face crumbled. "I made mistakes. But Claire, she manipulated me. She made me think." Emily cut him off. "Don't you dare blame Claire for your choices. You walked out on your family. You left me to raise our son alone while you chased wealth and status. And now you're asking for understanding." Benjamin's voice cracked. "Max, how is he?" Her jaw tightened. "Max is none of your concern. You gave up the right to ask about him the day you left." She gestured to the door. "This conversation is over. I suggest you prepare for the next session." The trial resumed with more damning revelations. Bank statements, forged signatures, and wire transfers painted a picture of Benjamin's greed. His lawyer fumbled through objections, unable to counter the prosecution's airtight case. At one point, Benjamin took the stand in his own defense. He tried to charm the jury, spinning a tale of bad investments and poor judgment rather than intentional fraud. But his story unraveled under cross-examination. "Mr. Harper," the prosecutor said, holding up a document. "This is a transfer of $200,000 from your client's account to one registered under your name. Are you denying this?" Benjamin stammered. I was planning to return it. It was a temporary solution." The prosecutor's lips curled into a smirk. A temporary solution that involved a luxury vacation to the Maldives? The gallery erupted in murmurs as photos of Benjamin lounging on a yacht appeared on the screen. Emily banged her gavel sharply. "Order in the court." Benjamin's facade cracked. His shoulders slumped as he realized the depth of his predicament. As the trial neared its conclusion, Emily prepared her final instructions to the jury. Her words were precise, free of emotion, yet each sentence carried a weight that left no room for misinterpretation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about sympathy or personal history. It is about trust. The defendant was entrusted with his client's livelihoods and knowingly betrayed that trust for personal gain. It is your duty to weigh the evidence and deliver a verdict based on the facts." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. "The law is not here to serve revenge. It is here to serve justice. Let us not forget that." Benjamin couldn't look at her. For the first time in years, he seemed to grasp the gravity of his actions. Not just the legal consequences but the moral failure that had brought him to this point. The jury deliberated for hours, and when they returned, the room fell silent. The foreman rose, clearing his throat. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Benjamin Harper, guilty on all counts." The gallery erupted, victims embracing one another in relief. Benjamin sank into his chair, his face pale and drawn. Emily's voice cut through the noise. "Order. Sentencing will be scheduled in 2 weeks." She rose, the gavel striking with finality. "Court is adjourned." As the courtroom emptied, Emily lingered at her bench, watching Benjamin as he was led away in handcuffs. For a moment their eyes met, and she saw something in him she hadn't seen before: shame. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough to undo the pain he had caused. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation on the day of Benjamin Harper's sentencing. Reporters filled the gallery, their cameras poised to capture the final chapter of a scandal that had gripped the city for weeks. Victims sat in the audience, their faces etched with a mix of anger and hope. For them, this day wasn't just about Benjamin's fate. It was about closure. Emily entered the courtroom with her usual composure, her black robe a symbol of authority and impartiality. But today felt different. The man standing before her wasn't just another defendant. He was a ghost from her past, a painful reminder of betrayal and resilience. She took her seat, her gavel cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Mr. Harper, please rise," she said. Benjamin stood, his once confident demeanor replaced by a quiet resignation. He had spent the last 2 weeks in a holding cell, reflecting on the choices that had led him here. Gone were the tailored suits and polished shoes. He now wore the plain attire of a man stripped of his power. Before sentencing, "Does the defendant wish to make a statement?" Emily asked. Benjamin's lawyer nodded, and Benjamin stepped forward. He hesitated, his hands trembling as he gripped the podium. "Your Honor," he began, his voice low and hoarse, "I want to start by apologizing to my clients, to my family, and to this court. I made terrible mistakes. I let greed cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I hurt people who trusted me. I have no excuse for my actions, only regret." He glanced at Emily, his eyes pleading. "I also want to apologize to you, Emily. I failed you in ways I can never undo. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I see that now, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life." The courtroom was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. But Emily's expression remained unreadable. She had heard apologies like this before, words spoken by those who only regretted getting caught. When Benjamin finished, Emily leaned forward, her hands resting on the bench. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of years of pain and strength. "Mr. Harper," she began, "your actions have caused irreparable harm to your clients. You stole from those who trusted you, leaving them financially and emotionally devastated. While your apology is noted, words cannot undo the damage you've done." She paused, her gaze piercing. "As for your personal apology to me, let me be clear. This court is not a platform for absolution. This is about justice, not redemption." Benjamin's shoulders sagged as her words landed like a gavel strike. Emily turned her attention to the victims seated in the gallery. "To those who suffered because of Mr. Harper's actions, I want you to know that this court recognizes your pain. Today's sentence will reflect the severity of his crimes and the trust he so egregiously violated." She looked back at Benjamin. "Mr. Harper, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 10 years, and ordered to pay full restitution to your victims. This sentence is meant not only to hold you accountable, but to send a message that betrayal of trust will not be tolerated." The gavel struck, and the room erupted into applause. Victims hugged one another, their relief palpable. Benjamin, escorted by officers, glanced back at Emily one last time. His eyes filled with a mixture of regret and acceptance. She met his gaze briefly, then turned away. Later that evening, Emily sat alone in her chambers, her robe neatly folded on the chair beside her. The day's events weighed heavily on her, not because of the trial's outcome but because of what it represented. A painful chapter finally closed. She reached for a framed photo on her desk, one of her and Max on his 10th birthday. He had been her anchor through it all, the reason she kept fighting. "Mom." Emily looked up to see Max standing in the doorway, now a tall, confident teenager. His presence brought an instant smile to her face. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, gesturing for him to come in. Max sat beside her, glancing at the photo she had been holding. "I saw the news. That was Dad, wasn't it?" Emily hesitated. She had always been careful about how much she told Max about Benjamin, but now it seemed he already knew. "Yes," she admitted softly. "That was him." Max nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to explain, Mom. I know what he did, and I know how hard you've worked for us. I'm proud of you." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she pulled him into a hug. "I'm proud of you too, Max. Always." Weeks later, Emily received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Benjamin. She hesitated, debating whether to open it, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page. "Emily, thank you for being fair even when I didn't deserve it. I know I've lost the right to ask for anything, but if Max ever wants to know about me, please let him know I loved him in my own flawed way. I hope you find peace. Benjamin." Emily folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She wasn't sure if Max would ever want to read it, but for now, it would remain a relic of a past she had finally left behind. She glanced out the window, the city skyline glowing in the distance. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of closure, not just for herself but for the future she had fought so hard to build. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.